take diagnostic data, so that's like an Xray, an MRI, a CT scan, ultrasound, and we overlay it over the patient during surgery to give the surgeon almost like a Google map for medicine. So they can see exactly where your organs are, exactly where that tumor is, and when they're cutting in, they're not cutting into an organ that they're not expecting to be there.
Welcome to the Invention Stories podcast, where we share stories of inventors who turn their idea into a product. Please visit our website at www.inventionstories.com. And now, from the Invention Stories podcast World Headquarters Studios in Morro Bay, California, is our host, Robert Baer.
Welcome to the Invention Stories podcast, brought to you by the Socket Saver. My name is Robert Baer, and thank you for joining us. You're listening to episode 40 of the Invention Stories podcast, Chandra Devam and Aris MD. Chandra Devam is a visionary. Her out-of-the-box thinking and ambitious ideas push the boundaries of possibility. Scott Edgar was a computer prodigy and as a child started programming at the age of 4. Working together, they've created Aris MD and were a sensation at the 2018 Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. I believe this invention is truly special, and rather than have me describe it, we have Chandra on the line from Edmonton, Canada. So let's get started. You've got a little bit of background in, are you more of you think of yourself as more of a marketing or an entrepreneur who's a marketer, or how do you see yourself?
I think I'm more of a visionary, big ideas. A lot of the patents that we wrote, I wrote a major component in them, and it was my idea, so. Well, I mean, we both kind of came up with some concepts, but I really come up with the big ideas.
Okay, well, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, what I could see, and it said that you had worked at Xbox marketing for Microsoft, and I mean, some people would think that's like a dream job, and they would want to build a whole career and be at such a great company. Why did you move?
Yeah, they were a great company.
It looked like you were just kind of there for a little bit, and then you wanted to do something different.
Well, I was in a car accident, and previous to that, I'd made quite a bit of investments. And I was in a car accident, and I broke my neck. I'm fine. It was a lucky break, and the swelling that I got from the injury held my bones in place, so I didn't need to have a surgery or anything. They found the break in the hospital, but said it's already started to fuse. But I had some slip discs that were actually more of a problem, so I needed to be off work for a little while. At the same time, I kind of had realized I made some good investments. Why don't I retire? So I was 28 at the time, 26, something like that. And no one else at that age is retired, so I got very bored very quickly. And Scott, my co-founder in this venture, was not loving the job he was at. He was working kind of under someone, and I said, why don't we start our own company? And he said, yeah, let's do that. And so we did, and we did software, kind of web development, software development, and app development contracts for people. And I just kind of fell in love with that side of tech, creating and innovating. I kind of always owned my own business, kind of on the side. So I think the first one I started when I was 11, and then I had a flooring company and, just all kinds of businesses. So I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit and bite, but that's when I really got into tech and let's just make any kind of software, and realized how talented Scott was. We were childhood friends. So I don't know if you read our background, but he was a child prodigy and started programming when he was 4. So Scott has been programming as long as I've been talking almost. I mean, maybe I had a couple of years, 2 years, but toddler talk is certainly not the same as the language we use as an adult. So he speaks programming the way I speak English. Like, he's articulate, accurate. It's amazing. So that's when I knew he was into computers when we were kids because he could make games or whatever, but that was when I first realized how talented he was, that he could just really make anything, which is amazing. I say it almost like my father's a writer, so how I kind of explain it to people and him is, and I'm a talented writer as well, but I didn't pursue that. And I say, well, I get to write sci-fi and then make it real. That's way cooler than having like a novel. And it's true. So he can pretty much make anything I can think of, which is how we got to Aris. We filed the patents years ago, so.
Well, when you were talking before, because it looked like you were a project manager at 3 Points Development. Was that your company?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was my company, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that was the company we founded after my accident. Yeah.
So this company Was that like one of those projects that you just turned into and just said, hey, we're scrapping everything else?
No. He had a really successful exit to his last, I think I can publicly say this. I'm not sure he can, but his last company sold to Apple. So after that happened, we were kind of walking around CES, and that year there just wasn't a lot of innovation. But AR was starting to come, I think this is around when Google Glass had just come out, and Oculus was big, and I thought that virtual reality was really going to make an explosion in the 90s. I remember being a kid and thinking, wow, this is a new way to see the world. And then when it didn't, it was a disappointment. So when it started coming around, and then AR was a complete game changer for me. I thought, okay, well, the first two applications for this are going to be gaming, which is my background, and media. But what could we do that would actually help people and really take things forward quickly? And I thought medicine and education. So that's where we focused the patents. And we actually founded our company at CES that year at one of, I think it was an Irish pub. I wrote the provisionals on the plane. So, yeah.
You said it was going to be in media for AR?
Yeah, and it's just starting to come. So I thought television, it would be a way to view television and movies. Actually, I have a friend who has a company, and they're doing that. And gaming, a different way to interact, socially. I could see those applications. So I thought those would be the first things that people jumped on and be kind of the low-hanging fruit. But I wanted to do something really innovative. So it's almost like Star Trek surgery we're doing now. Not quite there, but...
No, this is mind-blowing. And
thank you. Yeah.
Before we get really into it, what's the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality?
Well, virtual reality is fully immersive. So you put on like the Oculus or goggles, and you don't see any of the outside world. You are completely in virtual space. So whatever you see on the screen, you feel like you're interacting in real life, real time with that. Augmented reality is where you put on like a set of sunglasses. And then there's computer additives to it almost. So if you saw in my video, it overlays. You can still see the real world, but there's additions added to it.
Okay, so what is Aris MD? First of all, where did the name come from?
Mm-hmm. The name is, I think, Augmented Reality in Surgery, and then medicine at the end. Medical devices, I think, at the end it was just and I thought it sounded neat.
It does sound cool. Okay,
Thank you.
What's a good, nice overview to give our listeners?
So, we are an immersive reality company mixing augmented reality and virtual reality with medicine, training, and surgery. We take diagnostic data. I'll explain the augmented version first. So we take diagnostic data, so that's like an Xray, an MRI, a CT scan, ultrasound, and we overlay it over the patient during surgery to give the surgeon almost like a Google map for medicine. So they can see exactly where your organs are, exactly where that tumor is, and when they're cutting in, they're not cutting into an organ that they're not expecting to be there. So we're as different on the inside as we are on the outside. All of our organ placement is different. Surgical complications is the third leading cause of death in North America, and a lot of that has to do with anatomical differences. So that's where organs are located in completely different places, our sizes and shapes that the surgeon's not expecting. So a lot of the complications that they have no way of knowing, okay, well, this person's heart's a little to the left. I was expecting here I hit their lungs or an artery. Now it's complicated and it's more serious surgery. So it doesn't fall on the surgeon's skill. It's just we're all different. So we cut down on that by giving them a direct map overlaid on top of the patient. So they actually see, okay, well, I'm looking down on them. They can see your heart overlaid exactly where your heart is. The virtual reality component is it kind of gives, so radiologists can actually look at your imaging in 3D space instead of slice by slice. That's an easier one to give you a visual of. But then they can take the virtual imagery and go to the surgeon and say, okay, for this patient, this is the surgical plan. Then the surgeon can practice in virtual space a couple of times. I mean, my brain is pretty important to me. I would like them to practice virtually on it a couple of times before they cut into it, if that ever needs to happen. Then they can practice a few times, get a really good plan of attack, and then they put on the augmented reality glasses, and they see everything overlaid over the patient. So they know where to cut and, more importantly, where not to cut.
For those of you listening, you've got to look at the video on their website, and I'll put a link or I'll put the video on our website as well. But it's unbelievable. It's like it's showing you like what's underneath the skin. And is there anything like that out there currently that doctors use?
We have some competition. I mean, We filed a lot of patents on it. We have a little bit of competition just starting to edge into the space, but they're not, as far as I can tell, as far along as us. No one else can segment out the organs from the imagery. So I think in our video, we show that you can pull the brain out of the MRI. That's an MRI image that we've selected parts of the body out. So actually, before the surgeon does surgery, he could say, okay, I want to grab onto this heart, enlarge it, have a really good look at, okay, there's a little hole there, and have a really good look at it. Now I'm going to put it back because I know where that is, what the shape is, and then continue on. Nobody else's software does that. We also, if your viewers are technical at all, we're not using something like Unity, which is a really common program for building software in AR space. We wrote our own SDK. It's called an SDK. So we wrote all of our software custom. So we can transfer images from glasses to glasses. Doctors can tele-link in and see what the other doctor's seeing and say, okay, here's a second opinion now that you're in here. So I wouldn't say that anyone else is doing what we're doing. I think there's some diagnostic stuff that's happening, but not from what we've heard from the hospitals and everywhere else. So that's good news.
And now it's time for a commercial break. The Invention Stories podcast is brought to you by the Socket Saver. Do the plugs fall out of your wall sockets? The Socket Saver is an easy, safe, and effective solution. No repairs necessary, no circuit breakers involved, no electrical knowledge or mechanical skills required. Socket Savers are inexpensive, efficient, and portable. For more information, please visit www.socketsaver.com. It seems so awesome because I think for two reasons it seems awesome to me. Number one, I think that if you know exactly where it's at, I mean, I didn't realize that our hearts and everything, I thought the doctors knew exactly where they were, but if they're off just a little bit, that can make a huge difference because, number one, it helps them increase the chances of a successful surgery, but I think even more importantly is that they can do the surgery more efficiently, which not only saves time, but not only for the money point of view, but the longer you're under, it's probably it's better to get through the surgery quicker.
Less time under anesthetic is always better.
Okay.
Well, and also, I mean, I didn't realize that we were all different on the inside either. And I had a simple procedure. It was just a gastro procedure. It was supposed to be really simple. And this is kind of how I found out a little bit of this. I knew some of it, but when you experience it, it's different. They hit an artery when they were in there. It was supposed to be just a day surgery, go home in an hour afterwards. And I almost bled to death. I needed a blood transfusion because that artery was there and they weren't expecting it. And it was just an unfortunate nick, but pretty scary. And then I started thinking, well, how often does this happen? And that had some feed into when I was thinking at CES, how could we apply AR and make sure the surgeons have the best information they can to save our lives and take care of us. I'd say doctors are some of the smartest people. Medicine is really hard to get into. It's one of the hardest fields and faculties to apply to in schools. So when the smartest people are going into medicine, they're doing it because they want to save lives. So we're wanting to support them. Yeah, hopefully, I mean, I have not used to talking about it without the actual software or a demo in front of me. So hopefully your listeners are getting a good view or a visualization of what I'm talking about.
This is so important. And what gave you the idea to do this? This is what you wanted to create?
So I had this procedure where I almost died because they hit the artery and weren't expecting it. And that I said, well, wait a minute, how can that happen? And I found out, well, that's not the fault of the surgeon. That's actually, everyone has arteries all over the place, don't know where they are. And then I did a little more research, just kind of on my own, and went, oh, that's pretty concerning. I didn't know this. And talked to some friends of mine who were doctors and surgeons, and they said, oh, yeah, that's how that is. That's it. You wouldn't believe all the issues that come from that. So I thought, I guess I always thought about it kind of like Google Maps for medicine. Let's give them a good map so they can follow, and it relieves some of the stress from the surgeon to know what they're getting into before they got in. We also found out that there are surgeries in the U.S. that surgeons could do, but insurance is so high on them, they're not able, it's uninsurable because there's too many risks that could come because of this kind of thing. So we're hoping that also will open up more life-saving procedures that they haven't been able to do. Specifically, we're also really excited about a pediatrics project we're doing. There's a big difference between a 6-month-old and a 4-year-old. And a pediatric surgeon, or even a 1-year-old will go there, an 8-month-old and a 2-month-old. They're not trained on every size of an infant and weight. And while there's variances with adults, think about how much difference a child goes through between like 2 weeks when they're eating a lot. So it's so important for them to know where all those tiny little organs are, and they're so close together, and they're so little, and the surgeon's hands are so big. Think of how many mistakes can happen there. I truly believe that like in 10 years, even maybe 5 years, surgeons will be saying, I can't believe I used to cut in blind.
That's a great way of thinking. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for this software to work, it sounds like they must need fresh images. Is that what it is? You can't use images that
It's regular. No, you can use regular DICOM images. Anytime you're having surgery, you're going in with imagery, whether it's a CT or whatever the area of the body is, an Xray. So whatever images they're already using, they would just use those. Your heart isn't going to move around in your body too much. So depending on it, if it's something that they need fresh imaging on, say the tumor growth, they would do it anyway. So we're not actually adding any extra steps for the medical field at all. And we work with DICOM imaging, which is kind of like the JPEG for the medical world. Any medical files are in that format.
How about the educational process?
Yeah.
How do you teach the doctors how to use this virtual reality? Do you have to just go into each one, or do they all come visit you at a place? And I mean, is it real simple to learn?
We're just starting pilots right now. So there's not too much of a learning curve for it. We would maybe spend a week with the hospital and get someone on staff really well trained on it that could show the users how to use it. It's pretty easy. There's some hand gestures that they would learn. We'll probably do a video for them that goes out with the software. Currently we're doing, so we're also doing some surgical simulation for medical students using the same kind of stuff. That kind of, I'm hoping, helps with the learning curve. So if they've been using it in med school, you won't need any training. But we're thinking it's about a week or a couple of hours that they would need. Doctors are pretty smart.
Yeah. No, and I bet they would love
pick it up.
those tools, sure. So you're thinking maybe the best path for you is to start going to connect with the schools?
Well, we have some schools that are interested, but we're also in hospitals. The schools education was a little bit on, I put it in my patents, but it was more surgery that I was wanting to affect, and also like the practice before the surgery. So when schools started approaching us and saying, can you do this for us, our hospital training surgical residents in nursing, we said, sure, we don't need to add much to the software. So of course, we're already in talks with quite a few hospitals, and our radiology, MRI clinics, our imaging clinics here in Canada have a lot of interest, and then quite a few across the border in the U.S.
So what's the biggest obstacle for you to overcome?
We haven't run into very many at this point. I would say we're getting suddenly quite a lot of demand. So we're going to have to grow very quickly. But beyond that, we haven't had a lot of challenges.
Wow, that's good.
The doctors are pretty enthused about it.
Okay. So it's not money, education, it's just getting it done, huh? So how can...
Getting it done, yeah.
Yeah, how can all the listeners who listen help? Like me, it's like I want to help you, and I'm glad that I'm able to help you with some good exposure here, but like, how could somebody listening, could they encourage their hospital or anything, or their doctor to...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can point them to our website or connect with us. You know how else? Just talking about it, getting a conversation going about it is good. Medicine has had a lot of advancements, but I think that this will advance quickly in a way that hasn't happened in a long time. So it's pretty exciting for me. As a patient myself, I'm not a physician, so as a patient myself, I don't want to have surgery without this.
I just want to take a step back and ask you about the patents that you process and patents that you write. Have you written just a ton of them in your life? You talk about it like, it's no big deal. I just wrote up a few patents on the way back on the plane.
We've written some, yeah. I have a fantastic patent attorney out of Silicon Valley who makes it a lot easier for me, but you kind of do an overview. The patent process, it's like writing a novel, though. I think our one that's public right now is a couple hundred pages. They're a lot of work, yeah. It's not. We wrote the provisional on the plane, which was like a one-pager, and filed that, but the actual patent process is a lot of work. Would I say I've written a lot? It's hard to... Not a lot, but some. I have since starting Aris written a lot now, though.
I want to thank you for sharing your story on the Invention Stories podcast.
Oh, you're so welcome.
But before I leave, I wanted to ask you one last question. If somebody had an idea for an invention, maybe they got an idea on how to help save lives too, what advice would you give them?
So I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs. The first advice I give them is go and talk to a patent attorney. I think it was $1,500 maybe to file my provisional. If you're in Canada and probably the U.S., you can get grants to help you with that. And then your lawyer, if you haven't written patents, it's okay. Your lawyer can actually do it and walk you through it. You can approach venture capital if you need money, and they'll fund, a lot of them fund early stage even before you've founded the company. So it's almost like getting a partner. You can go on, I think it's Angel List, where you can get co-founders. If you have an idea but you need a technical person, they can kind of match you up with co-founders. Get yourself a co-founder who's technical. Someone who's good at business and someone who's technical is a great team. A visionary and a technical person, also a very great team. Then file your IP because that gives value to your company. Approach VCs if you need to develop it to get some money, and they also become essentially equity partners. And then you go from there. Then go to CES. Tell everyone about it.
Go to CES. All right. That's
yeah. TechCrunch. I mean, there's a couple of really good conferences that we do, but that's a really great way to. If you don't know anyone in the industry, connect. Like go to those conferences, meet people.
Great advice. Hey, I didn't ask. Now the healthcare is. I think you have like Universal or Canadian healthcare up there, right? And it's different down here. Is there just a completely different process? Is it more difficult to get things like? Is the path or the road to getting to where you want to be? Is it different having to go through either the government healthcare up there or down here? Okay.
It can be. We aren't having trouble with it, but yes, it's easier in the U.S. for most companies because your customer is the hospital. Here, your customer, you really have to clear it through the government and see if the government wants to buy it for the hospitals, essentially. Although we're having the physicians and the hospitals reach out directly, which is interesting. We haven't had that same issue. Maybe because it's such an interesting, exciting project, we aren't needing the same clearance as drugs or new devices would need. So it's an easier process. But yes, I would say that public health in Canada is harder to get innovation into, which is unfortunate because it holds our healthcare system back a bit. You can always reach out and send us an email if they're interested to hear more, or we could do a follow-up with you. They should reach out and actually contact you because that's easier than my inbox is sure getting full.
You've been listening to episode 40 of the Invention Stories podcast with Chandra Devam of Aris MD. And I want to thank Chandra for being our guest today. More information can be found at arismd.com. The Invention Stories podcast has been sponsored by The Socket Saver. Does the plug fall out of your wall socket while vacuuming, drying your hair, using a power tool, or recharging your electronic devices? The Socket Saver is an easy, safe, and effective solution. Please visit www.socketsaver.com. If you have a suggestion on how we can make this podcast better or would like to become a sponsor, please contact us at inventionstoriespodcast@gmail.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we invite you to write a positive review for us on iTunes. An easy way to get there is to go to www.inventionstories.com/review. More information and show notes can be found at our website, www.inventionstories.com. Thank you very much for listening today, and please tell a friend.